there's just not enough stuff that makes sense for investors, even from a pre-construction standpoint. I mean, people are buying condos all the time that are super expensive just because they have a great deposit structure, but are they going to make sense if you have to close on them? Probably not.
Welcome back to In the House podcast. We're here today with Sarah Larbi. I've been a big fan of you, Sarah. Listening to your podcast, you do a whole whack of things. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. To start off, please tell us about yourself and how you got into the business of real estate.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation, and great on you for putting together content for people to be able to learn. So I think that is awesome, and I know how big of a job it is to stay consistent. So thank you for what you do. So I started investing in real estate in 2013. And did originally the buy and hold strategy, then got into the BUR strategy. And then started doing some short-term rentals as well as long-term, mid-term. Left my 9-to-5 job in October of 2020. And since then, I have started buying some development opportunities. Specifically, one really fun one I am actually working on right now is a cottage resort. It's called Inspire Beach Resort. And we're going to do some cool real estate retreats there and events and all that good stuff. So that is going to be 15 plus cottages when it's done. It is a bit of a longer project. I am also doing some townhouse developments. Aside from that, I'm a podcast host. I am also now the guest host of Everyday Investor, which is on CHCH with Rav Tour, co-founder of the Bright Club, which is a real estate investing club. What else? I mean, I feel like
it's a long list. Absolutely.
So cool, though.
You've been featured in the Toronto Star, 1010 News Talk Radio, the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine. Sounds like things are going really, really well. What's your goal ultimately on sharing all this information? I mean, why not keep these secrets to yourself so you get the best deals to yourself?
I actually would prefer to motivate and inspire others. I think there's enough deals to be had anyways. And, if I can help somebody leave their 9-to-5 or, live a better life, then I have to, I wish somebody originally when I started was able to do that. And, I got into podcasts from Bigger Pockets back in the day, and they were able to do that. I'm like, I'm going to, return the favor. But, I enjoy teaching others. I enjoy seeing others, succeed as well. And I think there's just more, there's tons of deals out there anyways. So if there's a saturated area, I go into a different market or I start finding land to build on, create my own stuff.
That's a really good abundance mindset, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely, I think if people are successful in this industry anyways, what I've found if they're going out to networking groups or whatnot, there's not that many of us. This industry is quite small, right? There's not that many real estate investors in general. And so if we can help each other out, I mean, at some point we're either going to be working together or whatnot, but it is a small industry and our trust, brand, reputation is everything.
So you have a signature 7 steps to a 7-figure portfolio.
Yeah.
Sounds very interesting.
Do you want about that?
Yeah, I mean, you know what, I created that a while ago, but it's essentially just the steps that I took, right? Part of it is the analysis to be able to find the right market and then, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat, and so forth. But, I mean, it's just taking action ultimately, and just moving forward. And I think keeping what you can in the portfolio to be able to create that wealth.
What is your biggest, most successful transaction? And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, what's the biggest fail or lesson learned from a transaction that you've done in the past?
I mean, I don't know if there's one most successful transaction. It depends on how you look at it, right? If you're looking at it from the most bang for your buck, it's probably going to be those developments projects that I'm working on, or maybe one of the cottages. But I think the most successful project was actually when we did a BRRRR deal, which is essentially combination of buying and flipping, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And we were able to pull out all our initial money, make another almost $30,000 net. And we ended up taking my in-laws to Jamaica for like their first trip ever. So like the part where we took them to Jamaica was actually, for me, the most fun, because that was, the first time they saw a beach and whatnot. Or, potentially the cottage, because I think that was one, Matt, that was in 2018. My spouse, he's never been as passionate about real estate investing, and the cottage, I think, was like his, like, okay, this is cool, this works. We could do something different. So from that point, I think those were the most successful from a financial point. I mean, once you get into development, there's definitely, it could be very, very lucrative as well. And then I think the biggest downside, or the biggest, I mean, there's tons of stuff, right? Like, if I had to pick a few, it's just sometimes it costs a lot of money when you find big problems behind the walls. And so you just have to account for that. But, in terms of a huge, big failure, I mean, like, there's tons and tons and tons of them. And it's important to just get out of your comfort zone and take action so you can grow. But I think, maybe I could have done this a little bit faster, potentially. But actually, you know what? If I do think of a failure, and this is not per se real estate related, but I burnt myself out before the pandemic when I was working full time and doing everything else. And that could have been a failure. And luckily, I decided that it was better for me to, have my life and my lifestyle and whatnot. But I was working crazy, crazy hours. And, before that, I think I just didn't enjoy the process as much along the way. And so I would say, if I had to look back and say one thing that I wish I did differently, that was probably the one thing, is just taking more time to enjoy the process.
It sounded like just a couple of minutes ago, you said your spouse was skeptical of what is that the right maybe description of how, when you guys were approaching this cabin or cottage style of investment, that he wasn't as on board as you were?
It was more like the regular long-term rentals that we were buying in Brantford. I mean, they were not as fun for him, right? It was fun for me. I like to, buy them, put the tenants in after the renovations. He's just not into, he was just not into real estate investing. But I think the cottage piece per se, or when we're like, okay, we're able to refinance one of our properties that we bought, we can use that as the down payment, and we can rent out our cottage to cover the costs and also enjoy it. I think that was the turning point where he's like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, this real estate does work, where, he gets to benefit from something lifestyle related versus just financial.
So for you and your husband, then, for our listeners, is there a certain formula that you guys follow so as not to over leverage yourself? Or is there a certain, I guess, figure that you won't go over? What do you base it on?
Yeah, I mean, the BRRRR deals that I'm doing now, I mean, you're putting, as an investor in Canada, you're putting 20% down, unless you're like moving into it, right? But you're putting 20% down, and then you run the numbers. So what's the after repair value if you're going to do the renovations? How much the renos are going to cost? On refi, I mean, regardless, you're still leaving 20% in the deal, but I need to make sure that the deals are cash flowing, right? That my tenants and the rents that is coming in is covering all of my costs. And I would say, you probably just can't do much more than 20% loan to value unless you're borrowing private, which you can do. But I think for me, it's more important to have the cash flow, and it's not going to happen in all markets. This is why it's important to pick some markets that you'll be able to do that with, because if something does, like if my real estate portfolio or something happens tomorrow and there's a 20% downturn, I mean, I don't care. I'll just buy some more properties. It'll come back up at some point, but I'm still making money every single month by my tenants paying my costs. So, just have a buffer, right? So like if something were to happen, you can still, have an X number of months of expenses. Should a tenant decide not to pay, at least you float the property until you get them out, especially in Ontario. That takes a little bit of time if that happens. But I don't think it's like an equity per se play. I think it's more of a, I buy based on cash flow and fundamentals, and the rest. I mean, if properties go up, that's awesome. And the mortgage pay down gets paid, it's for savings. That's also awesome. My return is much better than I could do in the stock market or anywhere else.
For sure.
Seems so impossible with a Vancouver market with the properties being such high price. So we have to go
Hmm.
up north
Go to
or
the
to another
island. Go
province.
to the island.
So there's so many people that struggle to just even scrounge and put together a down payment to purchase just one property. They can't even imagine owning a portfolio of properties. What are some options that for an investor to be able to enter into the market?
Mm.
What are some, kind of strategies that they
Hmm.
would use?
Yeah, I mean, you can house hack. That's like also a common one, right? If you've got a duplex and you're living in one unit, you've got a renter paying rent in the other one. Oftentimes, they're going to be offsetting your expenses. And again, depending on the lender, talk to your mortgage broker, but you can get in with 5% or 10% down as a down payment instead of 20%. You can bring in a joint venture partner
Mhm.
that's going to bring the parts that you don't have, whether it's the financing or the mortgage. It's better sometimes to split something 50-50 than not get in at all. You can go into a cheaper market where your money goes further and then, do some renos, refinance that, and then take that cash to buy something more expensive that you can live in if that's the case to get in, Vancouver or whatnot. You can borrow private money. There's lots of different options. It just kind of depends on the costs and if somebody wants to control fully the assets or share with someone else.
Mhm.
You had a really good episode you released in August where a couple was doing a lot of joint ventures, JV, with other partners, and they're like, "Well, which one comes first? Is it the borrowing or is the property?" And so the timing is really important. So right on the center of your landing page of your website, you offer this free market fundamentals worksheet, and I actually downloaded it, and it is just an ample amount of information, all the fundamentals you need to analyze a property on whether or not it's a good investment. So there's a score at the bottom of the chart. And can you tell our listeners how you would calculate that cash flow using this chart to analyze properties? Because some of us are not good at math. And so I'm still trying to figure out what cap rate is on multiple unit buildings, but can you maybe just briefly touch on what would be a good number to use, like a baseline?
Yeah, so I think there's two things there. So the first thing is the market fundamentals, right? So just figuring out what is a good area and what is a good strategy for that specific area. So like in Vancouver is it's going to be a whole different strategy that's going to make sense potentially than somewhere like Brantford or Welland, Ontario. But just looking at like the population increase, the job market, I mean, there's a bunch of items there, and then I basically allocated points. Cash flow is a different situation. It doesn't mean that you're analyzing and you have a good. I think I put it on 100. It's been a while since I looked at it, but I think it's out of 100, so it's a percentage, and it's just kind of like if you're going into a new area and you're trying to see does this make sense to invest, because some areas have like one employer and that employer goes out the window or they move over to India or they go bankrupt. What's going to happen to all these people and their jobs?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the market fundamental checklist. That's free. It's just kind of the stuff that I look at if I'm going into a new market. The cash flow is a different story, and so the cash flow, what I look at is it's a different calculator, and basically it's just your income minus all of your expenses. Are you actually making money at the end of the month from renting it out? Because if you're not, then you're,
Mhm.
in my opinion, it's more speculation, right? You're hoping that stuff goes up and you're hoping that your mortgage gets paid down. But if you're paying, sometimes I talk to people and they're paying $400 or $500 a month out of their income and in their pocket to cover the costs for somebody to live there. Like that's probably just not somewhere where I would invest, just because there is no cash flow and no cushion. And so when I look at cash flow, I'll take all of the income minus the expenses, so your mortgage, your taxes, interest, insurance, and then I allocate a portion for like your maintenance costs, your
Mm-hmm.
capital expenditure costs, vacancy rates, utilities if applicable, and then I just want to make sure that there's something positive at the end that can, help towards my income goals. And if not, then that might not be the right market. It might not be the right property, or maybe you want to pivot to a midterm or short-term opportunity. I mean, I bought a place in Burlington recently. From a long-term standpoint, it might cash flow a little bit, but from a midterm standpoint, I furnished it and I get like twice as much per unit per month on the midterm market, and that made more sense for that specific market because it was a little bit more expensive.
That's really encompassing. That's good. All of
Mhm.
those costs that sometimes people forget about. And Sarah, do you manage your rentals yourself, or do you hire a company to do that for you?
I self-manage them. I mean, I screen my tenants very well for the long-term rentals. And I think that's going to be a big piece, right? Because if your tenant is good and you've screened them and they pay on time and they're not causing problems or doing things that are illegal, it will make things go a lot smoother. I won't, there's going to be probably a call every 3 months or so anyways. Appliances breaking down, some plumbing problem. But I think if you have a good team in place where it's like, okay, my tenant will message me, and maybe I'll hear from them once every 2 months, one of them. And I've got, 15 different sets at this point. And so I'll look at it. And if there's a plumbing issue, they'll send me like whatever, a picture. I'll send my plumber. My plumber emails me an invoice. I pay the invoice. I usually don't have to actually physically go anywhere. So when I look at it, for me to pay 7, 8, 9%, whatever the cost is for a property manager, when it takes me maybe 2 hours a month to manage the long-term portfolio, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, that's not to say that there's a wrong way or a right way to do it, but I've been able to set myself up in the markets that I'm at fairly well, even the short-term rentals, that I don't find the need to pass that off because it doesn't actually take a whole lot of time.
For you.
For me.
For you.
For you, yeah, right. So what advice would you have someone to beat analysis paralysis, which often comes up in your podcast? Is it can be a very costly mistake. And so how do you get someone to move beyond that and take that risk of starting to invest in real estate before it's too late?
I mean, that's a great question, but I think you just have to, know enough, and you just have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to do it. If I wouldn't have pushed myself out of my comfort zone, I would have never bought that cool resort that we're building on. I think opportunities come as you take chances, but
Which, by the way, we're
I
going
think
to
you've got
be
to.
going there because it's a real
We
estate
are.
convention happening there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
When it's up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. But I think if you buy on cash flow and you run your numbers and you've got a good team in place, mortgage broker, lawyer, paralegal, a realtor that really, really understands the investing strategy that you're doing in that market, the after repair value, the rents. I think if I do it first as making sure that I have cash flow and I run my numbers and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I would not be here if I started analyzing everything. There's no perfect deal. And if there's a perfect deal, I can guarantee you somebody that's got a ton of experience is going to take it before you even can see it and do anything because they'll just buy it, most likely sight unseen.
Yeah.
So,
Well, actually, Sarah, can you speak just a bit more about that in terms of, you touched on partners or alliances, kind of. So who would be the most important types of people, in your opinion, to help build your portfolio?
yeah, I mean, there's lots of important people. I would say, a good mortgage broker, please do not go to the bank because you are going to be capped very quickly and hit the financing wall. But a mortgage broker will help maneuver through the A lenders, the big banks, and then go to B lenders, Equitable Bank or whatnot, credit unions, private funds, private money, all that good stuff. So if you want to keep going, definitely a mortgage broker that helps and knows how to scale a portfolio is going to be critical. A good lawyer, not only a real estate investing lawyer that's going to do your transactions, but somebody that knows how to write JV agreements together, somebody that knows how to put together loans if you're going to borrow from Olympia Trust, or there's a couple trust companies that you can borrow RSPs or tax-free saving money from, and there's a lot of people that want to be investing in that. So you want to have a lawyer that you can grow with, a paralegal, even just like if your tenants are leaving, if there's forms, that kind of stuff, like just hire them on retainer, and they are going to be worth their weight in gold. A good realtor. By location, I don't use the same realtors for different areas that I'm going into because they don't have that pulse on the market. If I'm buying cottages, I have somebody that really specifically knows about cottages and septic tanks and what all of that stuff is. And so a good realtor is going to be key. They're going to be able to act quickly, go and see stuff without you having to,
For sure.
drive an hour just to see something that you wouldn't want to buy anyways. So they can save you a ton of time. So you've got your core team, your accountant, obviously, somebody that can grow with you again, when you start incorporating, if you do, all that good stuff. So that's really the core team. Property manager, if you want to have a property manager, a coach, or whatnot. And then you've got your local team. So your local team is likely going to be, your trades, your contractors, and all that good stuff. So the team is super important. Like, we did not get to where we are today by doing this by ourselves, but it's important to get the right team and just find other investors that are doing what you want to do in the areas that you want to do it in, the strategies, and figure out who their team is if you're starting from scratch, and start networking with those investors, and hopefully they can share that stuff with you.
Yeah.
That's good advice. And I think in your recent podcast with the 19-year-old policeman, he mentioned he was listening to another coach where he made decisions based on 30% of information. And that was really interesting, because this analysis paralysis, going back to that, how much of that decision making is based on your gut? I'm kind of curious if, after you kind of done this once or twice, and you don't want to lose out because there's other people that are going to be making decisions much faster than you based on 25% of the information. So what percentage of that is based on gut and intuition?
That's an interesting thing. So I'm pretty unemotional with most of my purchases, except for this little resort, because I'm like, this
It's
is
your
gonna be just so much
baby.
fun. It's gonna be my little project. It's my baby. But it's usually, for me, it's just numbers. I'm like, does this make sense? And the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. But like, these are the numbers. This is the after repair value. This is gonna be roughly the run-on costs. Can I get my money out, or most of it? And then I just go from there. Like, ultimately, I'm sure there's intuition and gut, but I for me, I think it's more like, does this make sense? And if it makes sense, let's just put it. I don't care if it's, not my ideal perfect deal, because there's no ideal perfect deal. You'll just create it over time, and it'll become better over time. But I'm not a perfectionist. I think that's always helped, where I am the type of person that's like ready, fire, aim. Like, I will just go do it, and then I will deal with it. But I think it really helps when you've got a mortgage broker that's like, here's option 1, 2, and 3. So here's, you can close using this financing. This is how you're going to get your money. Here's the second option. Here's the third option. As long as you're good with the worst case scenario. I mean, you got to get out of your own way. Know enough to take the step. But if you don't do anything, then you're
That's
not
right.
going anywhere.
Can you share with us, you mentioned the acronyms BRRRR, and I feel like it's not as popular like here in the West Coast. We use just flipping,
Okay.
but you briefly said buy, rehab, rent, and refinance. Or recently you kind of changed the R. I'm not sure. So maybe
I just added a repeat.
Oh,
basically.
yes.
But yeah,
I
you
know
got
there
it.
was some
Yeah.
that had 3 R's and then some that were 4 R's.
So it's like the same thing all over again.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, about that strategy and about your freedom community, because that's really exciting that you get to be involved with other like-minded people.
Yeah. So I think the BRRRR strategy is definitely for, I can't speak for every single market, but for a market where you can improve the value of the property, where you have enough that you can refinance and reuse that money, where the rents are still covering your costs and still making money, then I think that's a great strategy, because you're not having to worry about taxes, commissions on the sale. And so on the refinance, I can refinance, and essentially you're not paying tax until you sell the actual house. So I'm refinancing that money tax deferred, if you want to say. And I think that is a great strategy to just be able to redeploy it. It doesn't work in every single market. I think, as you're getting into more expensive markets, flipping probably does make more sense, because that's how you're going to have to, make it work. But the wealth creation over time, I think, gets created by holding on to these properties, so that you're not having to find the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And you can at some point say, I'm good. Like, I've got, enough to cover my expenses or more than my expenses. And at some point you got to make that choice to say, when is it good enough to be able to say, I've got the lifestyle I want. So that was, that's why I decided to do the BRRRR. What was the second
just
part of your
talking about
question?
like the
Freedom
freedom
community.
community and the
Oh,
involvement with that.
that is, Yeah, I mean, that's more of a course that I did for this year. So we actually have two calls a month. And it is essentially all the steps that you want to be aware of when investing. And so we have two live calls a month. I've recorded all the calls, and I'm going to be repurposing it as a view as you
Awesome.
go course. But it's been well received, and a lot of people have done some really cool deals with them. With the information.
So
So
for your BRRRR strategy that we had talked about, you mentioned before as well that sometimes renovation or on a property prior to renting it out would be important. Is there certain amenities or luxuries in a renovation for a property that you would consider um, the best rate of return on the investment?
um, I mean, again, it's dependent on location, but conversions are probably your best return on investment because you can take a house and create two or three
Mm-hmm.
units with it and rent each unit separately. And usually it boosts up the income that you can get. So that's probably like the number one thing that we do out here in Ontario. Um, otherwise, like kitchen, bathrooms, flooring, paint usually bring a good amount of lift, but I think it's secondary to actual taking a property and converting it into more than their current
Yeah,
number
for
of
sure.
units, so that you can really get that income going.
How long does that take? Like, what is the turnaround to rezone or convert a property like that? Because it definitely takes a long
I
time
mean,
in
you put
Vancouver.
Yeah.
it depends on the towns. Like some are quicker at issuing permits than others, but I would say once you have the permits in hand, and you've got your contractors, and hopefully this is where you pick contractors that have done these before, have worked with the cities, those
Mm-hmm.
specific cities, BCIN designers. Those are the people that will essentially do the drawings, go to the city for you, get the permits, schedule the inspections, and all that good stuff. Around three
Oh,
months,
that's
maybe four
super quick.
months on
Mm-hmm.
average.
It's like double or triple the amount
Yeah,
of time
we're
here.
about 5-6 months behind
Yeah.
here, and the cost is probably triple
Yeah.
the cost for the permits. What kind of tools, apps, or websites would you recommend as a really healthy resource? But besides your website, is there any others that you would recommend for investors?
I mean, the Right Club is one of them. That's across Canada, the rightclub.com. But other resources, I mean, that Real Estate Wealth magazine I think was great. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it gives you a good opportunity to see what people are doing in different markets. You can reach out to them and start networking and creating those connections. Um, you know, with the pandemic and everything, I don't know if there are the same meetups that there used to be, right? But there's lots of local networking groups that you can go to, and maybe they're virtual right now, or maybe they just started resuming back in person. I don't know, but find one for the market and start networking. Obviously, podcasts are great, and Canadian specific real estate investing
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, because I learned a lot in listening to US podcasts, and all of a sudden I realized that, well, the financing and the legal stuff and the tax stuff, like it's
Mm-hmm.
so different. So yes, the strategies can be similar, but there's still a lot of differences. But so Canadian content, Canadian podcasts would be good. Those are probably
Those are some
you
good.
know off the top of my
Yeah,
head what
no,
I can
that's
think of.
useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, in your opinion, right now, where would you consider the hot spots in Canada for real estate investment?
In Canada, I mean, obviously, I still really like Ontario, many parts of Ontario, Edmonton, Nova Scotia, or like Eastern Canada. But here's the thing: is in every market, there's going to be a market that can make sense, whether it's an hour away, 2 hours away, 3 hours away, and so you just have to figure out, do you want to be within driving distance? Do you want to invest
Yeah,
way more remotely? But like there's great opportunities in Bahamas. There's great opportunities in the US. I mean, I think it's just pick one, do the market fundamentals analysis. If it works for you, just like stick to, at least when you're starting out, stick to like one area, so that you're not all over the place, so that you actually can get to know it. And if there's a good deal, you'll
for
actually know
sure.
that it's a
Great
good
Mm-hmm.
deal.
advice.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually curious, what was your 9 to 5 job before?
I was in sales, so so my last one, it was a great job. It was for a coffee company, and it was actually Lavazza. So they bought out Mars Drinks, which is the company I used to work for, like the M&Ms and chocolate bars, but there was a drinks division. But prior to that,
In
I've always
sales.
been in sales, sales as a rep and then as a manager. But
Now you're inspiring everybody to get into real estate investing, and I'm going to list all the offerings you have and maybe just touch on how it's structured. So let's start off with the Right Club. How is that structured in terms of like,
Mhm.
do we get to see you one-on-one, or is there a group forum that someone's joining?
Yeah, so we have a few meetings per month. Sometimes they're lunch and learns. Sometimes they're right now, like a lot of them are on Zoom, so we can do coast to coast. Sometimes we cover Western Canada. Sometimes we cover Eastern Canada, different parts of the market. We bring in people, and it's an educational webinar essentially where people can ask questions. But it is a group, and we can have a few hundred people at once on the webinar. Um, but if you go to therightclub.com, there's forums, there's tons and tons and tons of content that you can actually grab for free, and we don't charge for it at this point. So if you live in the Ontario area, we used to meet in Burlington. We probably are going to start doing some live in-person events as well, but we are recording everything. So it's
Nice.
actually accessible to whoever is
So
anywhere
cool.
across the
Nice.
country.
Good.
Oh, what about the BRRRR VIP mentoring program?
That is OneonOne. So they have that BRRRR course that is essentially 26 specific calls that we've done throughout the year, and then 3 calls that are one-on-one per month. And then every 3 months, we actually go out in the field. So most of the students in there have done deals within like about 3 months of working together.
I've heard so many good testimonials, or read so many good testimonials about the field. The field work
Oh,
is
thank
awesome.
you.
How about the RISE program? What does that stand for, and what is that? How is that structured?
That is just video modules, very, very basic starting out content. And that was one of the first courses I put together. And it's real estate investing while staying employed, or still employed rather. But I would say if somebody wants to start off, they're actually better to do the BRRRR Freedom Community, because there's so much, like it's just newer. And so I actually put a lot more content in that course.
Okay, that's great to know.
It's hard to catch up.
I know, I know. Can you tell us a
Sound like
little?
me.
That's
Like,
what they.
let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this. But it's organized.
It's so
Okay.
yeah, that's true. Can you tell us a bit more about the Deal and Scale group program?
Yeah, I just got that email yesterday. It's so exciting.
Oh, cool.
Can you tell I'm a fan?
So
Yeah, you're a fangirl for sure.
That's hilarious. You know what? Here's the thing: is I think money, I think finances, and I think deals that make sense, like, is the struggle that people
Yeah.
have. And so I want to remove those barriers by showing them how you can access money, how you can access financing privately or just through different avenues. And then we're going to have some deals that some of my trusted team members will bring to the table, and people, if they want to buy it, they can. And we're going to do a mix of learning and education virtually. Some of it is going to be in person, but I'm still going to record it so that anybody can still, participate. And then we're going to do some field days, which will also be recorded if somebody wants to view as well, where we're going to go into different strategies. Like some of it will be actually going into the resort. And, if you guys are interested in building a development and cottages,
So
and here's
fun.
how that works. But it could also be from multifamily. It could be like, we're going to cover, it's going to be very all encompassing. And it's also only going to be 15 people. And so if somebody does need, like, hey, Sarah, can you help me analyze this deal? Or I want to go into this market, like, help me set up my team, I'm going to be able to help them one-on-one as well. So that's why we're limiting it to 15
Right.
people.
And you do have your one-on-one kind of pick your brain type of session offerings as well. At some point, do you find that you're at like full capacity? Like there's that amount of clients you can all just take on, but you get overwhelmed and maybe you want to just teach at a certain level of income earners. So is there like a threshold for you? Just kind of off the cuff, off the script, but
I mean, that's kind of why I do a lot of the group ones, right? So like the 15, so the Deal and Scale, that is the only one I'm actually doing from November to April, and that's all, right? And so that's a great question, because I don't want to take too many students on, because I still have projects I've got to focus on. But B, I love the group things, because it's okay. Like, here's the group for the year. We're going to all support each other. I'm going to help you guys. And that's it. So I used to have more stuff, but because now I've done a lot of the classes and I've recorded them, I'm actually packaging them as like learn as you go options, which doesn't necessarily require me to physically be anywhere. And so like, again, the VIP one-on-ones, I'll take a maximum of 5 at a time. So I'm not like necessarily like, my lifestyle and why I did real estate investing to have that freedom. I still have to preserve that. So there's students, that are going to be best suited for the group stuff. And then there's students that can do one-on-one, but, I just have to limit it, because otherwise, A, I'm stretched too thin, but B, I just want to make sure people get the
Protect your
support they need
time.
as well. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding and screening tenants program, because
Hmm.
like you said earlier, there can be horror stories
Yeah.
of finding the wrong tenants and
Yeah.
placing them in your home. So you offer that program. How much does that cost approximately?
I think it was like $200, but it's just like a self-learning course. So like the videos are done, they kind of just watch them, and then there's like the stuff that I use, the like templates and that kind of stuff. So it's like
That's
a
cool.
mini
And
course.
you had mentioned that for some people, group
Mhm.
settings better. Other people, one-on-one might potentially work better for them. Uh, how is the one-on-one structured? Is it like a set amount of time? Obviously, the cost I'm sure would be higher because it's your time as well.
Yeah. So the one-on-ones that I'm doing right now, they have to be in the BUR class, because it's such like good
Mm,
content and fundamentals that it just makes more sense for them to learn that stuff. And then what they're going to do. So it's basically 3 calls a month for the VIP. It's essentially the BUR VIP. So they have the fundamentals, and then we have the 3 calls to really tailor, for their situation, the next best moves. And then we go into the field and we make some offers
awesome.
and buy some deals. But again, that's just like I'll do 5 at a time. But anybody that does start, like ideally they're part of the BRRRR class, or at least they start learning it along the way, so that they're not asking me the exact same questions that they can get from
Yeah.
the class content too.
And not to mention, not just the Inspire Resort, but you are also involved in Napa Towns in Lakefield. So one one
You guys
really
did your homework.
interesting
Wow.
thing, one really interesting thing is that you have invited,
Yeah.
or there's an opportunity to invest in some of the projects that you're involved in too.
That's a
So
great
that's
option.
a fantastic
Hmm.
partnership or alliance that you're being able to add value to the developer. Like I think that's amazing.
Thank you. So, I mean, that's really where I'm going moving forward. It is just being able to create deals for investors, by investors. And Napa Towns, I mean, it was an off market piece of land that we got and I negotiated. And then I'm like, you know what? I need to bring in somebody with 40 plus years of experience that has built in this area. And, luckily I had that right contact. And so I said, okay, let's do this together. And then in exchange, they brought me into one of like a nearby other town project. We're doing 2 6-unit mixed use buildings in Omimi. So we're going to be bringing in some investors. But I think, one of the things is there's not a whole lot of deals that make sense. And so when we took the towns, I'm like, okay, we have to make them 2 units, because I really want them to cash flow. And, I want the investors to be able to have those, not necessarily like a mom and
Yeah.
pop person from off the street. So if I can create more specific deals that make sense for investors, and we are investors, and I bought one for myself as well. I think then like there's just not enough stuff that makes sense for investors, even from a pre-construction standpoint. I mean, people are buying condos all the time that are super expensive just because they have a great deposit structure, but are they going to make sense if you have to close on
Hmm.
them? Probably not. So, I'm trying to get into a different niche where I think I have the right partners for this, same partners that we're doing the resort together. And why not create something, because we're all fighting for the same deals, and there's lack of deals right now. So we just have to start creating
See, thanks for
some
creating
new
all these
ones.
opportunities for everyone. So I know you have a coaching session in less than 15 minutes. So I'm going to, I know you have the 5 lightning round questions on your podcast. We're going to turn the table around to you, ask you the same 5 questions you asked your guests. We normally call it the 5 rapid fire questions. So we're going to call it the 5 lightning questions, if I can borrow it, if you don't mind. Number 1.
Sure.
What is your favorite real estate investing book?
That
Right
is
behind you
hilarious.
there.
Okay. I'm like, which one's my favorite right now? You know what? I think I have to go back to Don Campbell's books. I mean, he's not writing them anymore, but Don Campbell had some great ones, The Acre System, and many others that were Canadian. And not that, there's not other good books, but reading Canadian content by an investor who has done it time and time
Yes.
again, I think it's great.
What is your favorite podcast?
I think right now, Ed Milet. He's just inspirational, not necessarily real estate related, but yeah. I just listen to his stories. I'm like, he is such a great interviewer, and he's got such
Totally
amazing
agree.
people on his podcast. So
What do you
I like his
do
stuff.
for fun besides talking and speaking and buying and selling real estate?
I love to have, people over for dinner and have my chef make, like 5-course meals. I enjoy working out. Like, I like to go to the gym. I do the F45 fitness training now every single day. I started doing some Pilates. I like to hang out at the cottage, do like girls' weekends and brunches. If it involves like food and wine, like wine tours, I love wine tours. Like if it's nice and the weather's nice, I just want to be outside. I don't care what I'm doing. If I'm, enjoying the sun and tanning at the same time. But it's, I would say in the summer, you'll find me at the cottage. And then we'll usually have like a revolving door of friends in and out, which is fun. I like it.
If you lost everything tomorrow, how would you start again?
I think that, I'll have the knowledge. I'll have built the network. And so I think if anything, I could do it faster than I did in the beginning, because now I know where to get financing. I know where to get money. I know how to, find the right people to get me deals. So I think I would just do the exact same thing, but it would probably take a lot less time. And I would just keep doing what I'm doing.
If someone has $50,000 and they want to get started in real estate, what can they do to use that money in the best possible way?
So I think if they want to do it themselves, they can either house hack, try to find something, maybe a duplex where you can get away with 5 or 10% down payment in a city that money can go further and just move into it temporarily. That's option 1. Option 2 is you can joint venture and find somebody that has, the additional amount that you don't have. And, maybe you're the active partner if they're bringing a lot more to the table in terms of financing or money. Or reach out to a good mortgage broker that has access to funds, because there are some that will lend 100% loan to value and the construction cost. Of course, there's an expense to it. If the deal makes sense, the deal makes sense. So I think there's many options.
Awesome.
Those are good advice.
No, that's good.
Those are good tips. And we added a final question. Where can our listeners find you?
So on Instagram, which is investor Sarah Larbi, they can just go to my website as well, sarahlarbi.com, and or send me an email at sarah@sarahlarbi.com. Please not Facebook or LinkedIn. I don't really use those as much, but if you want to talk to me, Instagram is good, or email or my website.
Well, Sarah, thank you for doing what you do. Honestly, I was really excited to have you on the podcast, because the interviews that I listened to you, where you're interviewing your guest, they're like average people. They are like, they know nothing about real estate. They're attending your seminars and community groups, and they're working full-time jobs. And then the next time, like the next minute into the conversation, they're quitting their 9 to 5s, owning multiple properties across North America. So these success stories are truly inspiring. They're willing to be super transparent. They're sharing their ups and downs. So I wanted to be able to celebrate. It's good that they can celebrate like the buys, but they also are willing to share some of the lessons learned. And so we appreciate you kind of giving exposure to just the ones that are the average
Yeah,
citizens.
showing what's possible and
Yeah.
creating freedom for people.
So thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time. It was an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks for your invitation, and I would love for you to be on my show in the future
Awesome.
as well. So we'll
Thank you.
Thanks,
figure that
Sarah.
out. But thanks very much.